You know, every town has that one story. The kind you hear whispered at a dying campfire, or mentioned in a hushed tone at the local diner when the rain is coming down hard against the windows. It's the story of a place, or a person, that just feels wrong. A splinter in the smooth grain of reality. Our story is one of those. And it didn't happen in some mist-shrouded Transylvanian castle or a forgotten asylum. It happened in a place just like where you grew up. Maybe it was in Ohio, or Kansas, or upstate New York. A town with a main street, a high school football team, and a quiet, unshakable dread that lives in the woods at the edge of the old Miller property. My name is, well, it doesn't matter. But a few years back, I was back in my hometown, taking care of my father's affairs after he passed. He lived in the same house I grew up in, a white-sided colonial at the end of a cul-de-sac, right where the pavement cracked and surrendered to the dense, ancient woods. The kind of woods that feel older than the town itself. We always called them the Whispering Pines, not because the trees were special, but because on still nights, you could hear a sound like voices if you listened too long. My father was a quiet man, but in his last years, he'd become reclusive, paranoid. His emails were filled with strange mentions. He'd complain about the static on the TV, even when it was off. He said the deer had started watching the house, their eyes too intelligent, too still. I wrote it off as the early stages of dementia. It was easier that way. The first night in the house was unnervingly quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight. I was going through his desk in the study, a room that smelled of old paper and dust, when I found his journal. It was just a cheap, spiral-bound notebook. The first few pages were normal, grocery lists, reminders to check the gutters. But then, the entries changed. The handwriting became jagged, frantic. October 12th. The man in the lot was back tonight, just standing at the tree line. He doesn't move. The shadows don't touch him right. They cling to him, like they're part of his coat. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The lot was the empty space between our house and the woods. I glanced out the window. Nothing but darkness. I kept reading. October 18th. The dreams are worse. I'm in a house, but it's not this house. The layout is all wrong. The doors lead to places they shouldn't. And there's always a door that is just a door. No handle. Just smooth, painted wood. And something is knocking. Not to get in. To get out. A shiver went down my spine. It was just the ramblings of a sick old man. Had to be. November 1st. It mimics sounds. Last night, I heard my wife's voice calling from the kitchen. Helen has been dead for 10 years. It sounded just like her, but hollow, like a recording played back in an empty room. I closed the journal, my hands trembling slightly. The house creaked, a normal sound, but it made my heart jump. I decided it was time for bed. I needed sleep. Sleep didn't come. I lay in my old childhood room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. And then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound. Knock. 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 It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was patient. Precise. Like someone tapping a fingernail on a table. My blood ran cold. I crept out of bed, my breath held, and peered over the banister into the dark living room. The sound had stopped. The house was silent again. I told myself it was the plumbing. An old house makes noises. I repeated it like a mantra. The next day, I tried to shake the feeling. I went into town, to the hardware store. I asked the clerk, an old-timer named Jerry who'd known my dad, if he'd noticed anything strange about my father in the last few months. Jerry's friendly demeanor vanished. He looked down, polishing the same spot on the counter with a rag. "Your dad," He came in here a lot towards the end. Bought a lot of locks. Extra deadbolts. Even asked about soundproofing foam. He finally looked at me, his eyes serious. He kept saying he needed to quiet the house. Said the knocking was keeping him up. The air left my lungs. Knocking. Jerry just nodded slowly, as if afraid to say the word aloud. Folks around here, we don't talk about it much. But every generation or so, someone in one of the houses near the pines, they start hearing it. My granddaddy called it the talisman. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't break in. Doesn't threaten you. It just knocks and waits. Waits for what? I asked, my voice a whisper. Jerry shrugged, a gesture of profound helplessness. No one knows. Those who hear it, they change. They get a look in their eyes. A kind of deep, fundamental confusion. Like they're trying to solve a math problem that has no answer. Your dad, he had that look. I went back to the house, the blue sky of the afternoon feeling like a lie. As I walked up the driveway, my eyes were drawn to the tree line. And there, between two thick pines, was a figure. It was a man. Or the shape of one. He was wearing a long, dark coat, despite the mild weather. His posture was unnaturally straight. And his face. I couldn't make out any features. It was just a blur of shadow, as if my eyes refused to focus on it. The shadows around him did cling to him, just as my father had written. They were too deep, too dark. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching the house. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I ran inside, slamming the door shut and locking every bolt my father had installed. I spent the rest of the day with every light in the house on, the journal burning a hole in my mind. That night, it began again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was closer. It was at the front door. I didn't move. I sat on the couch, frozen, staring at the wooden door as the patient, polite knocking continued. It went on for an hour. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I must have fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion, because I found myself in a dream. I was in my father's house, but it was wrong. The hallway was too long. The door to the linen closet opened into my old college dorm room. And at the end of the main hallway was a door I'd never seen before. It was plain, painted a bland off-white. And it had no handle. And from behind it, a sound I felt in my bones. Knock, knock, knock. I woke up gasping, drenched in cold sweat. The digital clock read 3:03 a.m. And the knocking from my dream hadn't stopped. It was real. And it was no longer at the front door. It was coming from inside the house. From the other side of my bedroom door. I scrambled back on the bed, pulling the covers up to my chin like a child. The knocking was right there. 3 soft, insistent raps on the thin wood separating me from the hallway. Go away. I screamed, my voice cracking with terror. The knocking stopped. For a full minute, there was only the sound of my ragged breathing. Then, a new sound. A soft, sliding noise. Like fabric brushing against the doorframe. And then, a voice. It was my father's voice. It was perfect. Every inflection, every slight gravelly tone. It said, "Son, let me in. I'm so cold." My heart shattered. It sounded so real. So helpless. A part of me, a desperate, grieving part, wanted to throw the door open. But I remembered my father's journal. It mimics sounds. I clamped my hands over my mouth, biting back a sob. I didn't move. The voice came again, now tinged with a heartbreaking sadness. "Please. I just want to come home." I stayed silent, tears streaming down my face. The thing on the other side of the door went quiet. I heard one final, soft knock. And then, nothing. The rest of the night was silent. I didn't sleep. At first light, I packed my bags. I couldn't stay here another minute. As I was loading the car, my eyes drifted to the tree line. The man in the coat was gone. In his place, standing in the exact same spot, was a deer. A large buck. It wasn't grazing. It wasn't moving. It was just staring at the house. At me. And its eyes. They weren't the dumb, glassy eyes of an animal. They were aware. Calculating. And in them, I saw that same deep, fundamental confusion my father must have seen. The confusion of a thing that doesn't belong here, a thing that operates on rules we can never understand. I never went back. I sold the house for a fraction of its value to a property developer from out of state. I heard through the grapevine that they tore it down to build a new subdivision. I sometimes wonder about the families who live there now. Do their children sometimes wake up at 3 a.m., hearing a faint, patient knocking? Do they see a man standing at the edge of their perfectly manicured lawns, a man the shadows cling to? I moved across the country. I changed my number. I tried to forget. But sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and the wind is just right, I'll hear a sound. It might be a branch tapping against a window, a radiator clicking, a neighbor stumbling home. But for a single, heart-stopping moment, it sounds exactly like 3 polite, patient knocks. And I'm right back in that room, a child hiding from the dark, realizing with a chilling certainty that some doors aren't meant to be opened. And some things, the talisman, the mimic, whatever you want to call it, don't go away. They just move on to the next house, the next family, the next lonely, vulnerable person listening in the dark. They just knock and wait.